My name is Fuat Keyman. I am working in Istanbul, Sabancı University. I'm the professor of international relations in that university. There is a think tank, Istanbul Policy Center. I am also the director of that center, mainly working on globalization, Turkey-EU relations, democratization and civil society development in Turkey and the region. It's more than a synonym with diversity. Of course, our societies, our world is globalizing, and the more globalized it is, the more pluralistic, the more diverse it becomes. And our countries are diverse and becoming more and more diverse. For instance, where I live right now, Turkey is quite a pluralistic and diverse society. But if you ask me if Turkey is really a pluralistic society, or if pluralism is a shared value, is kind of a policy by which the state governs society, my answer would be yes and no. And so in this sense, diversity and societies become pluralistic is kind of a sociological condition. But by pluralism, I mean a set of institutional practices, governing norms, and living together rules and norms by which society is governed. So in this sense, it is much more rule-based, norm-based idea, pluralism. Most important driver, of course, we have to make a distinction between advanced democracies or economically advanced societies and emerging markets or developing societies. But if the state, in terms of governing, is inclusive, then the society becomes more pluralistic. Meaning that, for instance, all societies have some sort of appeal and commitment to equality, pluralism, inclusiveness in the text, constitutionally or in their regulations and law. But that doesn't mean very much, because we know that what matters really actually is the way in which those inclusive, pluralistic commitments are implemented. And if the state and if those actors governing society are really committed to inclusiveness and accommodation in terms of implementing laws and regulations, then we have actually a more pluralistic society. But also in terms of culture of living together or coexisting. If actually there is an internalization of democracy, internalization of pluralism by people in the society, that people do not trust only those who are alike, but try to trust people, those who are different, then of course we have a better pluralistic society. But even in the realm of living together, in the realm of culture, if the state and the governing actors help this realm to develop itself, to enhance the culture of living together, then we have a better, inclusive, accommodating society. So I pay attention to institutions, governing actors, state structures, really committing themselves to not only textual, rhetorical understanding of pluralism, but implementation of it in their actual way of governance. The greatest obstacles, of course, if, for instance, from In my own country, Turkey, I could actually give an example, but this example can be multiplied and can be observed in different parts of the world. If the majority identity or the majority group try to hegemonize itself, try to establish its dominance over minorities, over the rest of the society, then of course we have a big hindrance towards actual meaning of pluralism as a sort of a value and a norm of living together. So in this sense, there has to be some sort of balance between majority identity and minorities. Secondly, if the state and state structure is stronger than society, meaning that in a situation where civil society actors, economic actors are not really well developed, are not really functioning, are not really creating some sort of impact on government structures, then we have actually a hurdle to pluralism. And thirdly, and recently becoming more and more apparent, if the government's choice in governing is totally market and economic rationality over society at large, or what is good for society at large, if there is a privileging of pure market and economic rationality over goods for society, then we have also an obstacle hurdle to pluralism in society. So in this sense, I would actually see the hurdles and obstacles. First, hegemony and dominance of majority culture over minorities. Second, the strong state over society, weak civil society and economic society structure. And then third, privileging of market and pure market and over economic rationality over what is good for society, what is publicly good for society at large. When we look at the sources of conflict or sources of violence, we know that poor people do not commit to violence. Poor people or actual poverty is not the main reason for conflict or violence. What is more important is the discrepancy, unacceptable discrepancy or disjuncture between certain segments of society and the larger society as a whole in terms of access to welfare, access to certain needs, and also sharing prosperity. If there is a big disjuncture between the rich and the poor, if the small group of or segment of society shares or has big proportion of wealth and well-being and resources in society, then of course that triggers and that causes conflict and violence. So in this sense, one of the reasons why I actually chose that question is that it is not the existing of poor people or the existing of those who are not really having equal access to resources, needs, so on and so forth, but the increasing disjuncture, injustice in society, that is the big hindrance to pluralism. So in this sense, in order for societies to be really pluralistic, in order for societies to be governed really by the institutional settings and norms of pluralism, then we have to have a balance between rich and poor. We we have to balance between certain different segments of society in terms of sharing prosperity, access to needs and so on, welfare, so on and so forth. In that sense, there is a relationship between economic or material well-being and the sustainable nature of pluralism in a given society or in our globalizing world at large. Again, actually, since I'm from Turkey, and in Turkey we have a big Kurdish question, we have a big Alawite question, and the governments have been tackling with these questions, and these minority questions, and the way in which the state's mistreatments of minorities have been the main causes of instability and weak living together culture in Turkey. I would say that from the perspective of Turkey, there is definitely a good and important connection between the way in which state governs society and treats minorities and the existing performance and sustainability of good performance of pluralism. Meaning that in recent years, the Turkish state has changed its way of looking at minorities, way of coping with minority questions. We have a reconciliation process with the Kurdish people or our Kurdish citizens, and this reconciliation process, this peace process, has been going okay, despite some problems. Of course, the state has to had to make a number of reforms in terms of language rights, in terms of right to media in our own language, in terms of participation in political life, so on and so forth. So in this sense, we realized last at least 2-3 years that the more inclusive the state is towards minorities, the more stable and the more peaceful the society can become. So in this sense, there is no negative causality between nationhood and minority question or lack of pluralism in society. Theoretically speaking, of course, what matters is actually the choice of the leaders. What matters is how institutions work in terms of not majority but minority. Of course, when you put majority and minority, you get society as a whole. So in this sense, choices matter. And Turkey made the wrong choice for a long time, and which actually created a big trauma in society, psychologically, in terms of human tragedy, economically, so on and so forth. But the last couple of years, within the context of the Kurdish question, to some extent the non-Muslim minority question, the state seemed to have the right choice to be inclusive, to be reformist in terms of tackling with the problems of the minorities. And so far, the last 2 years, we didn't have martyrs coming from the conflict. From both sides, we didn't have real conflict, in the society. Everyday life became more secure. People start, looking at their tomorrow and the near future more confidently. So in this sense, I would say it is a matter of choice, and if the state, so there's no sort of a theoretical incompatibility between the nation state and the minority question. Nation state could make right choices, and if they make right choices, then they could create actually stability and sort of better culture of living together, which is the other way of calling that society pluralistic. It depends on how to use technology, and of course, one of the clear, visible dimensions of what we call globalization is technological advances in communication and information. And of course, the world is really global village right now through iPhones and Facebook and so on and so forth. We have actually narrowed the geographical distances. So there's a huge geographical change in the world. So the world got smaller, and in that sense, it has become more and more possible to move from one place to another. So in this sense, yes, globalization has made our world much more diverse, much more pluralistic. And, technology has contributed to it immensely. But again, if that sociological, in a way ontological, diversity leading to a better society, more stable society, or helping us to be more confident about ourselves today and tomorrow. Of course, that's a big question to tackle with, and there is no one answer. It might be yes, but it might be wrong. And right now, when we look at the world, no question appears to be the correct question, because yes, the world is becoming smaller, but insecurities, uncertainties, ambiguities, risks are multiplying. We have actually a much more unstable world in terms of economy. Like sort of the poverty level is 47%, unemployment level is actually getting higher and higher. And of course, there are new actors on the table: China, India, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa, emerging markets, new guys on the block. But that is not creating stability. There's always conflict. And right now, when we are doing this interview, where I come from, Turkey, our southeastern border, is actually a border that separates Turkey from Syria and Iraq, and in Syria and Iraq we have new guys on the block called ISIS, terrorists, brutal and everything. So in this sense, they are televising it. They are actually sending their grotesque executions everywhere through social media. So the shrinking world does not mean a nicer, better, more stable world. So globalization sociologically make diversity much wider and much deeper. But on the other hand, going back to the first question, is this globalization contributing positively to much more pluralism as a way of governing societies or governing the world? Right now, realistically, I would say no, but normatively, I would say I wish.